welcome back to DEVO120. I apologize, we're unable to complete a Devo last week. We had a big 5th and 6th grade weekend and it was awesome. I will say there are several people viewing our videos, and I do not apologize for the glorious truth of God and the glorious truth of Christ, that God came to us himself in the form of Christ. He identified himself as sin on the cross to take that away from all of us. And as he rose again, defeating sin, he bound us to himself, inseparably to himself, if we will follow Christ. That's amazing. I'm not ashamed of it. We're in Leviticus 9 and 10. Now, the first 8 chapters of Leviticus provide these offerings, and God is providing a way for himself, as we see in verse 4 and 5 of chapter 9, for himself to appear to his people. They're going to see God. He's removing every obstacle between his people and himself. And I want you to see what happened all throughout here. What would the people have seen? Read it several times. What would the people have seen in this probably day-long process? How would the people have responded to this emotionally? And as you read this, I want you to think about 3 things. Ask you 3 questions. Question number 1 is, how did they see God? How did God move, and how did they see him? He moved in 2 different ways. How did they see him move? Question number 2 is this. As God moved, what was the people's response to God moving? We don't necessarily see their response except from Aaron. We see his response. We don't necessarily see the response in chapter 10, the second time he moved. But how would they have responded when they saw him move, even the second time? And question number 3 is, do you want to see God? Do you want God? Do you want to see him move and see him in power? Do you want to see his undoubtable evidence in this world? If you do want to see that, what's required of you to see him move? If you don't want to see God move and you don't want God, what is the consequence of that? Scripture applies whether you want to see him move or you don't. What's the consequence if you don't want to see him move? Pay attention to the first 4 verses of chapter 10, but be honest with yourself. Do you want to see God move?